The evening sun was fading behind the hills when I walked toward the stable, the only quiet place left in my world. The air smelled of hay and dust, and the rhythmic sound of hooves calmed my racing mind. I had spent weeks pretending that everything at home was fine, smiling at my husband's questions, acting as if the growing distance between us was just another passing phase. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Something in his eyes had changed, colder, distracted, somewhere else entirely. I came here every evening to escape the silence that had started filling our house. My horse, Shadow, was the only one who still listened without judgment. He had been with me for years, through every storm and every heartbreak. I ran my fingers through his mane, whispering the words I could never say aloud. Maybe I wasn't angry at my husband anymore, maybe I was just tired. Tired of pretending that love still lived in the walls of our home. The fields stretched far and wide, open and endless, just like the life I had once dreamed of. I remembered when love had felt like this, free, full of laughter, full of color. But lately, it had turned gray. I didn't know who he was seeing, and perhaps I didn't even want to. What hurt more was realizing how easily I had become invisible to him. As the wind brushed past my face, I felt a strange comfort. Maybe it was okay to let go. Maybe freedom didn't mean running away from love, it meant finding it again, somewhere within myself. The sky turned orange, and the first stars began to appear. Shadow nudged me gently, as if reminding me that life still moved forward. That night, as I led him back to the stable, I made a quiet promise. Tomorrow, I would stop waiting for someone who no longer waited for me. Tomorrow, I would begin again. The next morning, the world felt heavier but clearer. I woke up before dawn, unable to bear the silence that echoed through the house. My husband was still asleep, his phone resting carelessly beside him, glowing faintly with unread messages. I didn't need to look, I already knew what I'd find. The truth had been there all along, hidden between his late-night calls, his sudden meetings, and the way he no longer looked me in the eyes. I poured myself some coffee, watching the steam fade into the cold air. A part of me wanted to confront him, to shout, to demand the truth, but another part simply wanted peace. Maybe love doesn't die all at once, maybe it fades quietly until you can no longer remember what it felt like to be touched with meaning. By sunrise, I was already walking down the path that led to the stables. Shadow greeted me with a soft nicker, his breath warm against my hand. I smiled faintly, he had no idea how many secrets this place now held. The fields were covered in morning mist, stretching endlessly like an invitation to start over. That was when I met him, Daniel, the new farmhand my husband had hired a week ago. He was young, calm, with eyes that held something honest, something I hadn't seen in a long time. He greeted me politely, but there was warmth in his tone that disarmed me. We talked about simple things, feeding schedules, the coming rain, but beneath every word, there was something unspoken. Over the next few days, our conversations grew longer. He had a way of listening that felt effortless, like he understood silence as much as he did words. For the first time in years, I found myself laughing again. It wasn't about desire or escape, it was about feeling seen. Every moment I spent around him reminded me of what love once felt like, gentle, respectful, alive, but guilt shadowed every step. I still wore the ring, still returned each evening to a man who barely noticed whether I was there or not. The irony of it all wasn't lost on me. I had been faithful to someone who had already left me long before I realized it. And now, here I was, finding comfort in someone else's presence. One evening, after feeding the horses, Daniel lingered by the fence, his hands tucked into his jacket. The sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky with the same fading orange that had once marked the happiest days of my life. "You look like you carry too much," he said softly. I wanted to deny it, to hide behind polite smiles and careful words. But instead, I nodded. Maybe I do. He didn't ask anything more. He just stood there, beside me, in silence. Somehow, that was enough. In that quiet, I felt something shift inside me, a realization that love doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes, it arrives quietly, standing beside you, asking nothing in return. That night, as I walked back home, I didn't feel lonely. For the first time in a long while, I felt understood. But deep inside, I knew the days ahead would not be easy. Love was returning to my life, but not in the way I had expected. The rain came that week, soft at first, then steady and unrelenting. The fields turned silver under the cloudy sky, and every step through the wet grass felt like walking through the echoes of my own thoughts. I had stopped waiting for my husband's affection long ago, but something inside me still held on to the idea of what we used to be. Letting go completely felt like tearing away a piece of myself. He came home late again that night, smelling of a world I no longer belonged to. He mumbled excuses, avoided my eyes, and disappeared into the shower. I watched his reflection in the dark window, feeling a strange calm. There were no tears left, only a quiet acceptance that love, once lost, rarely finds its way back. The next morning, I went to the stable earlier than usual. The world outside was silent except for the sound of raindrops on the roof. Shadow neighed softly as I approached, his dark eyes reflecting something comforting. Daniel was already there, brushing down one of the horses. He smiled when he saw me, a tired but genuine smile. "You always come early," he said. "It's the only place that still feels real," I replied. He nodded, understanding more than my words revealed. We worked side by side in silence, the air thick with the scent of rain and hay. It wasn't the kind of silence that felt empty, it was warm, human, healing. At one point, our hands brushed accidentally. It was a small thing, barely noticeable, yet it sent a wave through me I couldn't explain. For weeks, I had buried every feeling under the weight of loyalty and fear. But now, standing there in the quiet stable, I realized that my heart had already chosen its truth. Love doesn't ask for permission, it simply grows, even in the ruins of something broken. When the rain stopped, we stepped outside. The sky was clearing, pale blue stretching over the hills. I could feel the damp air against my skin, a reminder that storms always pass. Daniel looked at me for a long moment before saying, "You don't deserve to keep living like you're waiting for someone to remember you." His words stayed with me. They echoed louder than any argument, more honest than any promise I'd heard in years. That evening, I went home and sat across from my husband at the dinner table. He was distracted, scrolling through his phone, half listening as I spoke. But I didn't need his attention anymore. "I think we should stop pretending," I said quietly. He looked up, confused. "Pretending about what?" "About us," I whispered. "We both know it's over." He didn't argue. He didn't fight. He just stared for a moment, then nodded faintly, as if he had been waiting for me to say it first. The relief that followed wasn't painful. It was peaceful, like finally exhaling after years of holding my breath. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't feel regret. I only felt lightness, as if something inside me had finally unchained itself. Days passed, and I kept visiting the stable. Life began to take on a new rhythm, slow, honest, and free. Daniel and I continued our quiet friendship, built not on rush or desire but on understanding. Whether it would ever become something more didn't matter. What mattered was that I had found myself again. As the sun set over the horizon one evening, I led Shadow out into the open fields. The air was golden, filled with the hum of summer. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. For the first time in years, I wasn't running from anything. I wasn't hiding behind someone else's love. I had taken my horse to a separate place, and somehow, in doing so, I had found my way back to my own heart.